Okay, let's talk about something that gets a lot of attention, the financial reserves of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're talking about billions of dollars, and that kind of number, well, it naturally raises some eyebrows and a whole lot of questions. In this explainer, we're going to break down a really specific argument that offers a unique way of looking at this whole thing.
We're going to dig into the why behind these massive reserves, but we're going to do it by looking through a pretty unique lens, one that connects a 21st century financial strategy to a very, very old story. And this is the big question, right? It's the one at the heart of all the curiosity and the criticism. Why on earth does a church need a reserve fund that could rival some major corporations? It's a fair question, and the perspective we're about to explore has a pretty compelling, if unconventional, answer.
I mean, if you're looking at this from a purely secular point of view, it's easy to see why it looks strange. The common thinking is that a nonprofit, especially a church, should be spending money as it comes in, not saving it up. From that angle, a giant reserve fund can easily look like hoarding, or maybe even greed.
But here's the twist. The perspective we're digging into today argues that this secular view is missing one absolutely crucial variable, one that completely reframes the entire debate. And that variable is the concept of revelation.
So, where does this idea of revelation take us? Well, it takes us all the way back to an ancient blueprint, the biblical story of Joseph in Egypt. And in this argument, this isn't just some nice metaphor. It's presented as a direct framework for the church's modern strategy.
At the very heart of this story is this idea of prophetic foresight. So what is that really? It's the principle of preparing for a future that has been revealed to you, even when it's completely invisible to everyone else who's just looking at the here and now.
This slide really draws the direct line between ancient Egypt and the modern church. The years of plenty in the story are compared to our current era of global prosperity. Joseph's massive project of storing grain, that's presented as the blueprint for building financial reserves today. And that terrifying coming famine is equated with prophesied future crises and instability.
Now, try to put yourself in the shoes of an ancient Egyptian for a second. You don't know about the coming famine. You just see this guy, Joseph, stockpiling mountains of grain. What would you think? It would have seemed completely irrational. You might have seen it as overaccumulation, unnecessary excess, maybe even a greedy power play, which, you have to admit, sounds a lot like the exact criticisms you hear today.
So let's connect that ancient blueprint to today. How exactly does a system of storing grain translate into a modern global financial strategy?
Well, just like Joseph created this huge centralized system, instead of just telling each family to store their own little bit of grain, the argument is that the church is doing the same thing. You've got a global membership, resources have to be centralized so they can be sent anywhere in the world, often to deal with crises that cover entire regions.
So here's the real kicker. The principle of storing for the future hasn't changed at all. It's just the medium of storage that's different. In an agricultural society, you store grain. In a global, capitalist society, you store capital and market assets. It's presented as the modern-day equivalent of a granary.
Okay, so if these financial reserves are really a modern granary, what exactly are they for? Let's break down the specific jobs they're meant to do, according to this perspective.
According to this framework, the reserves have 5 main jobs. First, as this slide shows, is protection, basically guarding against future persecution. Second, it's about making sure global operations can keep going even if other income sources dry up. Third, and this is a massive ongoing cost, is maintaining the institutions. We're talking hundreds of temples, tens of thousands of congregations, schools, you name it. Fourth, it's preparing for future crises on a scale we might not have even seen yet. And finally, it's all seen as an application of self-reliance, which is a core theological principle.
And this really brings us to the core of the whole disagreement. The argument isn't really about the amount of money, but about 2 fundamentally different ways of seeing the world and thinking about the future.
This slide just lays out that divide so clearly. On the left, you've got the secular assumption that nonprofits just shouldn't pile up wealth. But the prophetic view on the right says, nope, the future is unstable and that requires preparation. The secular view might see a huge pile of money and think, greed. The prophetic view frames it as stewardship. And a key difference is how they see tomorrow. The secular view kind of assumes the future will look a lot like today. The prophetic view explicitly rejects that idea. And finally, to the claim that the reserves will never actually be used, the counter-argument is that, just like Joseph's granaries, their justification only becomes crystal clear after the crisis finally hits.
This quote from the source material really just crystallizes the entire argument. It says,
God's leaders sometimes instruct his people to store resources on a scale the world considers irrational, because the future God sees is not the future the world anticipates.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Whether we're talking about an ancient civilization or a modern institution, what does it really mean to prepare for a future that you believe has been revealed but that other people just can't see yet?